Call to order the Monday, April 21st Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Hey, Paula, can you please take the roll?
Commissioner Corrigan,
Here.
Commissioner Gray,
Here.
Commissioner Schlossberg, Commissioner Seavam,
Present.
Vice Chair Corey,
Here.
Chairman Kovacevic.
Here. Okay, do we?
Oh, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Commissioner Proctor.
Here, I just whispered that I'm here too. Be so formal.
Okay, item 3, call to the public. Paula, do we have any speaker cards?
We do, we have one speaker card from Suzanne Isaacs.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Isaacs. Most of you know who I am, or I'm across the street as an owner. I just want to say that I've been involved with scouts and associations, and I've been president of associations of communities. And I find the best way to get any kind of interaction, people to show up, people to help out, is if they know about the meetings. All the way up till 8 o'clock this morning, I did not know this meeting was scheduled. It was not on the website. It was not on the community board out there. It was not in the newspaper. It was not as of Friday.
I personally placed it there on Thursday morning.
I look every day when we go by and run, I look. And there
I
was
will
nothing
check
posted.
this evening.
But it was not there. I mean, I'm here to represent a lot of people, and nobody seemed to know this meeting was here today. So I just say, if we could at least get the notifications out there, Lemoore, you'll get more people to show up and have an opinion and participate. If they don't know about it, they can't do it. That was just my comment. Sorry.
Thank you. Paula, do we have any more speaker cards?
No, Chair.
Okay, item number 4, consideration and possible action approving the regular meeting minutes of Planning and Zoning Commission of March 10th, 2025. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? We have a 5-0.
Commissioner Proctor, are you voting?
Well, I'll move to approve. I did attend the last meeting, and I did read
Okay.
the minutes, so they look fairly thorough.
6-0.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 5, consideration possible action, ordinance 25-02, amending the Fountain Hills zoning ordinance to add chapter 27, downtown overlay district.
Chairman, Commissioners, good evening. I will step through this. Be a little bit of a repeat from last month, but then I'll point out some of the modifications we've made based on the discussion at your last meeting. So again, to set the stage a little bit, the Town Council approved a downtown strategy last September. Part of that strategy calls for some updates to the zoning regulations to meet some of the things that were identified through the process for the downtown. In particular, through the open house that we held in May of last year, citizens had the opportunity to review a number of ideas and options for improvements in the downtown area. And these are the things that got the top scores from that review of the public, which dealt a lot with, again, some of the zoning ideas and things we're trying to accomplish here, promoting the active use along the sidewalks. Currently in the downtown area, it is mostly zoned C2 with one small area of C3. And then there are a couple of overlay districts that are currently in place, entertainment and planned shopping plaza overlay districts. They do complementary things, but overlap in some respects into what they do. So it's been a little bit of a challenge trying to refer to both of those overlay districts as we help people navigate how to do development in the downtown area. So we're using this as an opportunity to combine those two into one new overlay to handle the things that are in them, plus make some adjustments to address the topics that have come up through the public review process. So again, we're looking at one new overlay that we're calling downtown overlay. It then divides the overall area into 3 sub-districts. And so the first is the one along the avenue, as we have looked before last month. It allows by right the uses in the C1, CC, and C2 zoning districts. It changed from last month based on some of the feedback we had and trying to focus then some of the more active uses just along the frontage of the primary streets, saying that within 50 feet of the right-of-way of those adjacent streets that the uses get limited to active ground floor uses such as restaurants, cafes, bars, taverns, retail, and other types of activities. Also a change from what you had last month in these same areas through approval of the special use permit. You could have any of the other uses, the office uses primarily that we currently see. There was a concern if the business becomes vacant and you can't fill it back with the active uses or after it sits there vacant. Well, this gives the opportunity then to get it filled again, but through the special use permit. That puts, excuse me, that puts the emphasis on what we would like to see most, but doesn't prohibit the other types of uses from happening. And then it continues to allow the entertainment type uses that are currently in the ordinance. Last month we had some discussion about the amount of residential density. Currently the ordinance allows up to 8 units by right on a second floor. We talked last month about increasing that to 15, but as we discussed it, we realized that probably really wasn't quite enough. And so I'm proposing now to up that to approximately 30 units per acre and using 2 figures to calculate it. One is the square footage per floor, which calculated out to this approximately 1742 square feet per floor, which gets you to probably approximately 30 units per acre. Given the small size of these lots, 5,000 and 6,000 square feet, trying to understand what that means in terms of number of units per acre, it's a little bit challenging. Plus, we're dealing with multiple floors, and so you can get there either way, depending on which one makes more sense to you. But again, it's approximately 30 units per acre. You'll recall that you've seen recently a couple of requests that we're getting up at 40 and 45 units per acre. That level would still require the special use permit, but up to this level then would be by right. Any questions on that maybe before we go on? Okay. And then the SUPs could be used again to allow the
Director Wett, hold on one second.
okay.
I think we do have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, John, a couple of questions came up in public comments, the concerns about the south side
Yes.
of the avenue. And I don't know that we've addressed those thoroughly. The issues were that those who spoke, those 2 speakers, had serious concerns about, rentability of their property because they're not incorporated into the Avenue of the Fountains redevelopment, if you want to call it that, downtown project. And are we planning to do that? Is that Part B, or what? How does that fall in?
Chair, Commissioner Corrigan, as of this time, staff is not proposing to include the south side within the proposed overlay for a couple of reasons. The primary one is through the development agreement that is tied to that property. That development agreement ties the development to the existing zoning as it sits today. So even if we were to adopt the overlay and apply it to that land, it would be of no effect because through the DA, they can still develop by the existing TCC zoning district.
Park Place 2 and 3.
Yes.
What-
In this, excuse me.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The other slight problem with it is because of the base zoning district is different, it really complicates the overlays quite a bit to try to draft it to cover the different types of zoning. Go ahead.
And I think the gentleman who spoke was somewhere in the proximity of the Chase Bank area. And I don't know if that was on that south side of the avenue. I think a little further up. In other words, Park Place 1, just beyond that, to the west side. That was my understanding.
Yes, I think it's primarily the Isaacs that spoke about it before, and they're over
Right.
here in the Washington Federal Building at the corner of La Montana and the Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gray, did you have anything? Okay.
And so again, the things that would be allowed through special use permits in the Avenue District are the the non-active commercial uses within 50 feet of the right-of-way, and increases in residential density on the upper floors. So again, part of the discussion has been how big should this avenue district be, or what's the area that should have the limited, more active, vibrant uses? Suggestion is that extended all the way up and down the avenue and along Verde River is a little bit much to try to get that active use, and maybe it should be something smaller. And so here are a couple other options for the commission to consider, and certainly other options than these are available too, but I just wanted to give you some thoughts of smaller areas, if you want to go that way, that would potentially be the avenue district that would have the active ground floor uses as a primary use. Comments, or go on?
Any questions so far?
This is just a comment. This is Clayton.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Commissioner Corey.
All right, thank you. I apologize I couldn't be there this evening. But just looking at these three different options, I think we talked about this last time. I think we should leverage Verde River Drive to be a connector for the businesses in the back and the commercial in the front. So whatever we can do to encourage traffic to kind of walk down that way, whether it is extending the Avenue District into Verde River, or finding some other way to make it attractive for people to want to walk down that way. That's going to be the main connector. So however we do it, I think we need to find a way to make that be an entrance, be a kind of a gateway into the back of that parking lot.
Okay, and Commissioner Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make the comment on this particular slide. I think bigger is better in this in this approach as we try and not regentrify necessarily, but transform, I suppose. So I wouldn't be in favor of taking the smaller, truncated versions forward necessarily. And just dovetailing on Commissioner Corey's comment on Verde River, the first time through this version of the packet, my thought was Verde River should really be allowed to flow both ways. That it could be a continuation of the avenue, or it could allow encroachment to the south as well from the adjacent district. And then just one other comment, since we're on the avenue still, I just want to make sure that we're considering some parity with height, both north and south side of the boulevard as we carve out this particular district.
Chair, Commissioner Gray, on that last point, both have a 40-foot height limit, the north and south sides. The development agreement for the Parkview did allow for taller heights, I believe up to a maximum of 54 feet, if I remember correctly, although they weren't built quite that tall. I think it's more in the 48-foot area.
Okay, let's move on.
And then, again, just kind of wrap up, we talked about this a little bit last time, what is meant by active ground floor uses. And so here's a list of some items that we would consider appropriate on those ground floors along the avenue. Moving on to the business district, fewer changes here, but did make the same change here in terms of the residential density, increasing it up to approximately 30 units per acre. There was some discussion about trying to increase the amount of employment type uses that we were considering in the innovation district. As we looked at that, given primarily the lot sizes, building sizes, and opportunities elsewhere in town that we think would be promoting those, we didn't propose making that type of change here, but just this one. In the innovation district, no particular changes here. Again, the main change is to allow these more employment type uses, light industrial, you might say, with the laboratories, the manufacturing, and light assembly in that area. And then temporary uses is another item that's in this ordinance. No changes being proposed here, but allowing temporary uses with some guidelines through the zoning administrator and town engineer. One item that was mentioned last time was some of the challenges with the larger corner lots that by the original overlay district were required to provide all of their own parking, which has created some challenges with continued development or redevelopment of those larger corner lots. I did want to point out, it wasn't brought up last month, that the last time we did an update to this overlay district, we did add a provision to allow up to 50% parking reduction for those larger corner lots through approval of SUP. Then the one other change that's in here based on a discussion last month is to add basically a build to line in the area south of Palisades, that at least 70% of a ground floor needs to be within 5 feet of the front property line, so we get that building wall and that pedestrian interest along the street. And then vacant properties, again, looking at the opportunity to encourage temporary uses and improve maintenance. So that is the proposed ordinance with the changes based on our discussion last time. Any further questions for me at this time?
Commissioners? Commissioner Gray?
Thank you, Chair. Just one on the innovation district that I think maybe we ought to consider is, we're opening the door to residential in the innovation district, and it's another spot where I think if we believe in an innovation district, let's close that back off. I don't think residential should be allowed purely by SUP. If we want to allow residential in the innovation district, I think we should further clarify that to say second floor and above, but not allow it down at grade. I just think we lose the value of the district there. And then on the parking, I know that the chair has some thoughts on the parking and the discount rate that we're applying there of 50%. I've seen it work in other jurisdictions where you're allowed to take a radius of the parcel and apply some discounted rate of public street spaces. I don't know if that makes sense to work something like that into the equation and not inadvertently burden 208. I don't know, that's just something to consider that I've seen work pretty well, where you have an abundance of street parking. That's it.
Commissioner Corey, Commissioner Sviam?
I do have a couple of questions. This is Phil Sviam.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Question about the parking opportunity. I went through the minutes from the last meeting and reviewed. Mr. Isaacs talked about there not being enough parking available if entertainment uses were all stretched along the avenue. I guess I've not seen anything that's done any types of calculation that if all first floors were filled with the types of uses that this suggests, that there would be adequate parking for all those uses. Has there been any study done on that?
Chair, Commissioner, no, at this time there's not been that study. We've taken the perspective that when this area was platted and zoned, given the building heights, it was approved as a mixed-use center that will have a variety of uses, and the parking available would provide the parking for whatever mix of uses evolve and happen in the area.
I think we did, Commissioner Sviam, John did take a look at the corner lots, the bank buildings, Washington Fed and,
yes,
and Chase. And even with a 50% reduction in the required parking, they don't come close to allowing a restaurant use in
To
those
fill
buildings.
the entire building.
Yeah, to fill the entire
Be
building.
something less than that, but not the entire building.
Okay, so there's not enough parking.
For those intense
If this
uses,
was
but
to be max. Hey, go ahead. Sorry.
but yes, excuse me, Commissioner, but yes, for those intense uses on those corner lots, that would be the case for them to fill the entire building.
Well, so if this was approved with the larger district, as I guess has been talked about, then if he wants to, or if he decided or sold the building and wanted to put a restaurant, if all of this worked together to accomplish the goal that the town has, there would not be enough parking to maximize the entertainment district or the Avenue district with the larger scenario. So unless I'm missing something, shouldn't this be addressed now?
So I guess, Chair, Commissioner, so today, there's nothing that prohibits all the businesses in that area from becoming restaurants or bars or other high-activity entertainment areas. Those uses are all allowed today.
Okay.
They are
Right.
allowed
They
today,
are.
but
They-
in the large lots, you couldn't put a restaurant there unless you provided on-site parking.
That's correct.
That would
For the full
require you
building.
to basically knock down the building and build a smaller building.
Or just use a portion of the building and use the rest of it for something else, but yes.
Right.
Well, it's only one, but it's only one floor. So the rest of the uses on first floor would have to be, well, if it's vacant, it's going to have to be a restaurant or a bar or another type of store. Correct?
So I guess maybe we need to be clear, Chair and Commissioner, are we talking about all the lots or just the large corner lots?
Well, as an example, we've included Washington Federal in this.
Correct.
In that scenario. So again, I guess I think that it's only fair that whoever owns that property, whether it's Mr. or Mrs. Isaac or someone that they sell it to, that they should know what they're going to have to do and what the limitations are with this proposal.
Okay. So if I may, again, Chair, Commissioner, today, under the current overlay, there are 4 larger, over 10,000 square foot corner lots as they were originally platted. As this was originally platted and developed, those 4 larger corner lots were required to provide all their own parking. And it's been that way since they were developed until a couple of years ago when we did allow for a 50% reduction in that parking through approval of special use permit for those 4 lots. The rest of the lots in the area, all of their parking is provided for in Plat 208, regardless of the use. And so again, those 4 lots have always had that concern or that issue. Nothing's being changed about that, impacted on that by this, except for a little bit of restriction in the use that might happen on those corners, but it still allows for a lot of uses that are at the same 250 parking count.
Well, but that also assumes that the uses of the other buildings on the avenue are not going to change to restaurants. So what if they all became restaurants or bars?
And that could happen today. There's nothing that prohibits that.
Right, but okay. I guess my concern is from that perspective, future parking. Let's, if I could, I'd like to know what people think about the Chamber and TAMA's memo that came to all of us. Is there any reaction from anybody?
Phil, can you repeat that, please? A chamber?
Okay. I believe that everyone received a memo from the Chamber and TAMA, the Avenue Merchants Association.
Yes, this is Clayton. I received that as well.
Okay. Did everybody else receive it?
Commissioner, I'm getting a lot of shrugs from the other commissioners.
The chamber needs to be here if they want to take a position.
Well, yes, and they've been heavily involved in this. Whether they're there or not tonight, they were at the community meeting back on March 19th. So I don't think they've not been participating. Like I said, they may not be there tonight, but they did send out a memo that I think has a lot of legitimate concerns, as well as some of the concerns that were from the public on the 19th of March that did show up.
So, Chair, if I may again interject, that memo, again, did come from the Avenue Merchants Association, and I'm not aware who all they did or didn't send it to. I know I did get a copy of it. It deals primarily with the physical improvements. There's one paragraph at the end that talks about the zoning change and supports creating a vibrant area. And I believe they'd seen the latest version and supports the SUP approach to allowing I'll again say the less active uses on the ground floor through that process is what I got from it in terms of the zoning that we're talking about this evening.
Well, I realize we're talking about zoning, but this is going to have, the aesthetics of the avenue are also going to have an impact on the merchants. So I don't know if all of this is tied into one, John, but I'm not really sure that how this is all going to work out, since we probably going to have one shot at this. So.
Okay, Commissioner Gray?
I will. So I absolutely appreciate where Commissioner Sviam comes from, and I think that that's kind of the status quo disposition of the town of Fountain Hills and the voices that are typically heard in the town of Fountain Hills. But sometimes you got to pull a bigger lever, and sometimes the lever is bigger than the latest craft fair or the things that we just mundanely do over and over and over and over again in this town, and we think that somehow that's going to bring growth and prosperity to this village of ours. It never happens. And so we've got to do something bigger and bolder, and this sets the ground rules to do that. I would take this further even. Looking at the slide that John's got up, I'd take full advantage of the frontage of the park and the lake, and I would wrap this Avenues District up and around Saguaro all the way up to Parkview and maybe even a little bit beyond that. It's not an inflection point, but it's a decision point for the town, again, where we either triple down on being nothing more than a services, bedroom, sleepy little box canyon here, or we take a shot. And if we take a shot at the expense of a parking ratio, okay, let's do it. How many cars park in this town for our little craft fairs? Thousands, right, for the big ones. Do we really have a problem? No, it's just a more bustling, urban-like environment that has more vitality to it. I don't care if there's a few more cars on the street parked downtown if this district catches fire and it gets life to it. Those aren't constraints that we should be metering ourselves with. We should talk about it, we should consider it, but it shouldn't be a rate limiter for us in this scenario.
Well, I think, sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Sviam.
I think the opinions of the business owners are important. And whether they're there tonight in the meeting or listening, I don't know. But I think that this is not a matter of drawing, and I'm not suggesting this to you, Peter, but it's not a matter of drawing colored lines on these maps. It needs to take into consideration what the impact is going to be on the people that have taken, in some cases, their life savings and put it into their business. I'm not interested in saving all the service businesses, but I do believe in private property rights, and I think that some of this needs to be fleshed out better before making a decision. I'm not suggesting that it just kick the can down the road either. I think we need to make some make some moves, make them soon, but we also need to make sure that the voices are heard that are selling their wares, selling their plates of food, and paying sales tax on it, which seems to be the main reason, or one of the main reasons we're doing this, and rightly so. But I do empathize with those that are trying to make a go of it on the avenue, as well as the other streets, and being in business. These are small businesses that are really impacted by whatever decision is made on something like this. And I think that and I understand people have reached out to the businesses, they've invited them in. I don't know how those conversations go, or even if they've taken place. Maybe the businesses have not been as aggressive as they should be in protecting their interest. But I think that it's something over the coming months that really needs to be explored. Like I said, this is a one-time deal. One-time deal. And that's not just for the zoning, but it's also what this avenue is going to look like over the next 50 to 100 years, basically.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. And if I can piggyback onto that, does the commission have an appetite for exempting the large lots that can't park these uses and therefore would be prohibited from having these uses? Does it make any sense to exempt them from the restrictions and allow their the uses that are currently existing and give them those uses by right in this overlay district? Does that make any sense?
Chair, I'll not hear anybody else respond, so I will. So again, if we look at the Chase Bank lot, we'll just use that one. So today it's a bank. Under the proposal by right, here are the types of uses that could go in that building if it didn't want to be a bank anymore. And most of those have a very similar same parking requirement that a bank does. It's only a couple of them that don't. And if there were uses beyond this that wanted to go in there, such as a realty office, they could apply for the special use permit for the realty office to go in there, and given constraints, that may well be approved, or whatever else is not on this list that would want to go in there. So it's not, and those same, whether we adopt this overlay or not, those same restrictions are basically there today in terms of it becoming a restaurant because it's already limited in the parking. That's not changing with this.
But they could have a first floor office, they could have a first floor service provider, like.
They could do that by, that's the only difference. Today, they could do that by right.
Yeah.
Under this, they would need a special use permit to do that on the ground floor, in the 50 feet closest to the street.
So that, again, I'll pose the question, does it make sense to allow them to continue using, have by right service providers? Does the commission have an appetite for that?
No, Chair.
Commissioner Corrigan. Commissioner Corrigan.
So I guess I have to think about this in the way that what is the concern from the public? Now, the only two speakers we had at the last meeting that attended, and they did attend and they did speak, were Colby and Isaacs. And both of them were concerned about the limited use of the property that they have. And they extended some concerns and expressed some concerns about that. And one, I think it was Isaac, stated he'd been holding the property for quite some time and was concerned that he couldn't do anything profitable from his investment. So I don't hear any other investor approaches or investor comments other than these two. So we have very little to work with other than, I guess, Colby and Isaacs, unless there's something I haven't heard in the past. So I am concerned about that, and how do we address that? I guess they're investors, and they are in the area. We have to be concerned.
Commissioner Sveum, or is that Commissioner Corey that spoke up before.
Well, this is Phil speaking. I'm not, I don't know that I'm in favor of isolating anyone along there. I'm mainly interested in making sure that this is well thought out, and maybe, I obviously late in the game, but I think that there's needs to be more participation, and I do look, and I'm not. I know the Isaacs have purchased the property. I was obviously there the last meeting and listened to them. I'm not looking for the town to bail them out. They made an investment choice, but we are changing the use of what the building can be from what they purchased it for, the way I understand it. So that's my concern with treating people that have made significant investments. And yet, I guess you can delete their property or segment their property out of this, but I think it's just kind of putting a Band-Aid on this, frankly. And that's just my opinion.
Commissioner Proctor.
I'm just curious of the rationale for what appears to me as a new person, a draconian parking restrictions on uses of within the Avenue District. Why are we restricting the use of a building based on parking?
Chair, Commissioner, so today, except for the 4 large corner lots, any use that goes in on any of those other buildings or lots, we don't worry about the parking. The parking's there in Plat 208. It's only those corner lots that from the beginning have been required to provide their own parking, and so there we would do the evaluation of the use versus the parking available. But they have been now given the opportunity for the special use permit to reduce that by 50% if the council can approve that.
Is 50% enough? Should it be 75%?
Chair, Commissioner, we would probably need to have some further discussions with Plat 208 about that. It's a challenging calculation, but we have done some rough calculations. These lots can build to 40 feet high, so 3 stories. If all these lots were built with 3-story buildings covering all the lots, there's not enough parking. There's nowhere near enough parking for that much use. We don't expect that to happen. It'll be something less than that. As we see, it's mostly 1-story and a few 2-story buildings. And so we haven't been concerned about that. But that, again, complicates doing a calculation on how much is really available to transfer from these corner lots into the rest of Plat 208. But it was designed originally thinking that none of those corner lots would use any of the Plat 208 parking. If we start adding more in there, again, it's complicated. Could it be 75%? I suppose it could. It could be 100% if we wanted it to be. But again, I think we'd need to get the Plat 208 board involved in that discussion a little bit.
Just by observation, it appears parking in Plat 208 outside our festivals, the art fair, it seems to me is generally underused.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. It certainly, as a general rule, overall, there are isolated spots where things are more busy, or at various times they're more busy, but as a general rule, I think that's true.
Director, can you point out the 4 lots that are
They're not-
limited?
Let's see here, let me go to here and see if is this pointer working? So it's, whoop, that wasn't supposed to do that. There we go. Try to stay just on the, so it's again, what we'd typically call the Sears building. And then this other corner here at Parkview and Saguaro, and maybe there's 5. And then here, the Executive Suites building, the Chase building, and this one was originally a larger lot, but it's been divided into 3. And because it was a larger lot back in '92, I think this is the date, it still counts towards that.
Commissioner Gray?
So in the napkin math, what is the max burden to 208 if you, let's just say you pushed 100% of the,
Chair, Commissioner, it's been too long since I tried to look at those numbers. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I mean, I still hold the same position, it's inconsequential. And we're applying 0 as the discount rate to any municipal parking on top of 208.
Correct.
And if we think we're holding back parking to park RVs for art fairs, that's a mistake as well.
Mrs. Clayton.
Go ahead, Commissioner Corey.
Thank you. Don't know how to raise my hand on the phone. I think less parking. I'm not really inclined with having too many parking restrictions, and I try to think about it from a customer point of view. Customers don't always know where to park. They'll drive around, they'll find something, and they'll park there. Unless there's a sign right in front of the business, which sometimes there's 2 or 3, and they can help people that may be bringing something in or out of the store. That's pretty specific, and that can help people get into the business. But other than that, I think we need to make sure that visitors feel like they can, park where they want to and walk around to different businesses and not feel like there's restrictions on where they can park based on what business they're going to. So I'm hoping that there's a lot more flexibility in allowing people to park where they need to park. It's just my 2 cents on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners right now? Paula, do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Chair. Larry Myers, and then Roger Isaacs.
Chair, Commissioners. So 10 or 15 minutes ago, Commissioner Gray said something that has probably been forgotten while we were arguing about the minutia of parking and collecting sales tax. That's not what this is about. I sit on a committee. This is about trying to find the corporate entity to come here to this town, which will, in fact, organically change the avenue of the Fountains and the downtown business district, wherever it's put. So the Innovation District and having any possibility of residential in there, I'm out. I'm looking for an employer to bring employees that are young enough to have families to turn the downtown into a vibrant place. It's not about collecting sales tax. It has nothing to do with collecting sales tax. It doesn't have anything to do with the Chamber of Commerce and the businesses that are down there, because they're operating already. And we're not using up all the parking spaces. So if we're gonna think small and argue about all of these little things and worry about whether, if we have enough parking spaces, or somebody might have to actually park up on La Montana and walk 50 yards down to a restaurant somewhere, we're gonna miss the point, which is what we always do. It's what we've been doing since 1987. We miss the big picture that downtown will organically develop itself if we allow for a major business, a corporate entity to come here. And we only have, John, what do we have, like 3 pieces in town that we can actually do this? And this is one. The Innovation District is one place. There's a couple of others. So I'm with Peter. If you want to think small and worry about parking and sales tax and, just cut off half of the area because you didn't draw a yellow line, be my guest. I'm not in for that. We got people working on a bigger vision in a longer term, and it doesn't involve any individual building in town. And yes, I get it. Investors buy buildings, and we have to look at them, but you made the investment, and we're trying to make it better, and discussions of small nature only make it harder. Thank you.
I'm Roger Isaacs. I'm the owner of the building across the street over here, and also was on the Plot 208 Board of Directors for the previous cycle. I just saw the latest revision earlier today, so I went through and I tried to identify some of the key things that I think are critical to have changed or further discussion on. I don't believe it's ready to be signed off and passed along. So I'm just going to try to hit these real quick, and I'll let you read the details. Allowable density, there's changing the allowable density, in my understanding, to square footage, and that would eliminate 4 of the 6 vacant properties from being able to build. You need to stay with the units per acre approach. Otherwise, you're going to have restrictions you don't want. The numbers they're using are 25 per. And if you don't believe me, if you go and look at the reference they have for R5, that's how it states its requirement. And that's below there. Corner parking rules. Corner parking rules, there was a statement made in the summary that we weren't being honest about the fact that we can't put a bar or restaurant in our building. Our building sits on almost 25,000 square foot of land. It represents about a 9% footprint. And yet if you look at the parking spaces we have is 11. I'm not sure how you'd get many more than that in there. I would need, here in the yellow, 35, if my eyes are right, to actually meet code requirement for my building. That's how many I'd have to put in there. I've got no place to put other parking spaces. Even using John's recently developed SUP allowance, I would still be short 18 parking spaces. I don't think the, well, I better not say anything because I'm going to run out of time here. You can read about this, but the point is the 92 was a very discriminatory and negative rule that was put in and taken out many, many years ago. I'm not sure why after 30 years it still even exists and is being brought up, because it restricts the ability of the property owners and the big property owners to do things. One thing that you guys should know is that people like me and the other big property owners have to provide our own trash enclosure, have to provide our own parking. We don't use anything in Plot 208, yet the town forces us to be members, and because the membership fee is by square footage of your property, we pay the highest fees. So we get nothing out of it, and year after year, we're forced to pay. And the problem here is we're not allowed, if you restrict the uses, then we all have big buildings that aren't going to be able to be utilized. And I'm not sure about everybody else, but the solution of knocking the building down to build a building 1/5 the size, a 500 square foot restaurant, I might as well just put a mobile food cart on there, right? So that doesn't make much sense. Again, so, oops, I've got 2 more. Do I have time?
Sure, go ahead.
So my recommendation there is to drop the 92 rule. The Avenue District Development Agreement lacks zoning, or locks the zoning. And I understand John was good about bringing this forward and saying, hey, here's our real issue. The problem is, as Gray said, we would want to make the Avenue District bigger, not smaller. On none of the 3 proposed things do we see the south side of Avenue being part of the Avenue District, which is unusual since we've got banners up both sides of the street right now that say, welcome to the Avenue District. I think any of us that live in town know that both sides of the street are the same. So to avoid including that, or even beyond that, as Pete was saying, doesn't make any sense to me.
We can't include it because it's part of the development agreement.
Don't you have an implicit development agreement with every builder that comes forward under student zoning, applies for a permit, and then gets permitted use? I've got permitted use. My building did 20 years ago. What more do they have that I don't have? Now, if you look at the statutory, if you were here in the other meeting, not the other one, but the one about, the what? Yeah, that was here, you had strong, very emotional comments against these use restrictions. In fact, people saying that this is going to be against the law. I've already talked to people before. I don't agree with it, but they're already saying let's lawyer up because they believe their property values of the people on the north side specifically are going to be hurt. Bart said he would actually support our efforts against the town to stop the restrictions. The issue isn't left and right. The issue is take away the restrictions. There's not a business person or developer you're going to talk to that thinks putting restrictions on the use is going to help you get more development, okay? And that's what you're proposing. That's the problem. If you restrict the use on our side, you're saying you can't include the south side because you don't want to apply those restrictions or it'd be difficult to do that. Well, I think if you apply it to our side and not the other, all the office space is going to move across, right? That's all that's going to happen because you're going to say we can't have office space. And our buildings on our side don't support the desired uses. And the three bigger projects, 100,000 square foot of property on the north side of Avenue that can't because we are restricted under the 92 agreement and we don't have enough private parking space. So none of us can participate in the bar restaurant type of world. I can't even, and because of the way the things are being written, they're extending the use requirement for parking to outside space. One thing they could do is take that out of the equation. So then I could, across over here, I could put fencing in and have a small restaurant or bar if the outside space wasn't included in my parking required. Okay? So there's things that could be done. The problem as an outsider, looking at most all the stuff that's coming out is we're talking about general rules and requirements. The town's not looking at specific uses. Ask them to give you one example of somebody that could put a restaurant over here. Ask them why, what restriction needs to be lifted to get the 4 or 5, 6, 7 properties on the north side that haven't developed and been sitting empty for 20 years developed. Also, there's a lack of understanding. Not to hammer you guys.
We need you to wrap it up.
Yes, sir. Okay. But a lot of stuff is brought up in these meetings that's absolutely wrong. Most of the property and development you're talking about is Plat 208. Plat 208 has a 2-story maximum limit, 30 feet. So you guys sit and think this is what the reality is. The reality is that's not the case. As members of Plat 208, we're under those. The final thing is the build 2 line, and I just bring up a couple things here that the build 2 line restriction seems kind of weird to me because you're saying we want everybody to be up 5 feet off the property line except the big corner lots. We want you to push back. Why don't you want everybody to come forward? Also, in the write-up, you've restricted the thing not to the 92 rule, but to the 10-800 instead, which means that Elizabeth lot that you guys already approved as a full lot coverage would have to back up because now it's no longer 92 real property, not corner properties. You're saying 10-8 is the limit. If that's the case, then her 12,000-foot lot would be under this rule and have to back up. So I think you need to, at minimum, change that to be a 92 rule if you're going to do it, or just take it out and say that even the corner lots could build up to the front if that's what you really want to do. So appreciate your time and your service.
Any other speaker cards?
No, Chair.
Commissioners, any other comment?
This is Phil again. My comments are directly on the avenue. The innovation area, the district that Mr. Myers is talking about, I have no problem with what is being proposed there. My comments are strictly on the avenue, so I'll leave it at that.
Any other comments, commissioners?
I'm just wondering what the ramifications would be if we eliminated the parking restrictions altogether? Does Plot 208 have a veto authority over eliminating those restrictions?
Chair, Commissioner, technically, no, they don't. The town council can approve whatever zoning rules they want, and they can be in conflict with the CCNRs or their rules. Just as Mr. Isaacs just brought up a moment ago, whereas our zoning ordinance allows 40 feet of height, their CCNRs do limit it to 30 feet of height, but they have not pushed back on the couple of proposals that have come in with the 40 feet of height. So we're going to enforce our rules, and they will, to their degree, enforce their rules.
Okay, so we're in a position where we have a draft of an ordinance.
Yes.
And so we're looking for a motion for, okay,
Well-written. I go now. I don't think anybody had, right?
right. No, this is,
John, do you have a copy of Mr. Isaac's
No.
email? Can you hand him one, please? And maybe we, you know, kind of look to you for guidance, John, but he's got this pretty well laid out. I think maybe we ought to just, if we can, I mean, if we go to number 2, if his calculations are right, it's 180 space impact across those 3 parcels, right? The 2-story office building, the Chase parcel, and the one that he owns, which is a 16,600. 180 spaces across those 3, double it to get to the 6 overall. 400 spaces at absolute worst case build. I usually yell at other people for that. The first section, John, switching back to units per acre versus the square foot per dwelling unit. I do see the merit in that related to those corner parcels, right? The rest of the parcels per dwelling unit works just fine, but he's getting discounted by the parking requirement. Go ahead.
Just a comment, some of the lots that are corner lots. On that one, I've worked, I'm a general contractor, and I've worked with some of the people that have small lots, the 1250s, that have looked at building small business with space above. If you say you have to have 1,700 square foot on a floor, and their lot's only 1250, you've eliminated the possibility they could ever make code here, okay? So that's what's knocking them out. On a per acre, per square foot basis, they can still have their 1 or 2 residential units. But when you switch to this language, they can't. And so, again, that's why I believe the R5 is per area, not per floor.
So I don't know if you're looking for a response from me yet. I haven't read this. I'm a little bit lost in what to say. But I will say that my calculations were specifically per floor.
And John, is your understanding per floor that then you're basically requiring less a common hallway if there was more than one unit? You're basically saying that people are going to have to build 1,700 square foot living residences, which basically says town of Fountain
It's
Hills is
built
not
up.
supporting
No,
affordable
it's not saying that at all.
That's
It's not
the
saying that at
effort
all.
would be, right?
It's not saying that at all.
How, if you have a floor, it's like a second floor,
Right.
that has less, that averages out to less than 1742, they would be over the required units, right?
So, Chair, I don't know if you want us to go through this discussion here and now at this point.
No,
I didn't think so. So, Chair, while, we don't want to overly belabor the point here, I think I'm hearing enough comment and question that if the commission wants to go with another continuance to next month so we can continue to work out some of these details and come back with some of the numbers that have been discussed, certainly glad to do that. There's not a requirement that this get recommended on to council tonight if you're not comfortable with that.
Commissioners, are you okay with that?
I'm actually okay with that. I understand the urgency of getting a major, I'll use the word operator, a major corporation or someone of status that could bring in, let's say, employees, which could really lift up the community by investing in property, investing in everything. And I understand that, but I am concerned about these individual issues that Mr. Isaacs has brought up tonight, and I would like a little more time to address the issue rather than rushing ahead. I don't think we're rushing, that's the wrong word, than pushing ahead and not addressing this concern in particular from two people who have made public comments in that regard. Again, I understand the urgency of getting a major corporation to build up the town. It's the only way we're going to survive, quite frankly, is to have a major investor here who can hire, can employ, and the opportunity then to use those employees to, well-heeled employees, I might add, if that's the perspective, to enhance the community by, building and buying new homes, investing in our community. And I understand the concern, but I would rather hear this out, give it a little more time. It's a long-winded way of saying I'd like more time.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Corey, Commissioner Sviam?
I would be open to that continuance as well.
I agree.
Commissioner Gray?
I think if you're going to do it, then we have to spend some real energy understanding what the possibilities are related to the development agreement that Park Place was negotiated on, as well as the ability to, maybe influence isn't the right word, but the ability to weave in 208 and maybe even have representatives of 208's board participate in the discussion. I think those are two big variables here. And I think once we understand the 208 in particular, we just have to figure out how we normalize these corner parcels. I mean, it's 40-year-old zoning that's dictating whether we, turn left or right 20 or 30 degrees, and we need to figure out how to normalize those parcels into this whole scheme.
And I agree with that. I think that that was my focus on the corner parcels. We have to normalize those parcels. So I'm looking for a motion to continue this topic until the May meeting, which would be May
9th, I believe. Paula, do you have that handy?
12th?
12th. That's June 9th. Yeah, June 9th.
Be here. It's up to you.
60 days?
I'd prefer it, but it's up to you.
Why don't you make that? Why don't you make that motion?
Okay. I'll make a motion to continue agenda item 5, related ordinance 2502 to the June 9th? June 9th, regular session of the Zoning Commission.
I'll support.
Is that a second?
That was a second, yes.
Can you put your mic on, please?
Yes, second.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Gray made the motion, Commissioner Proctor seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Corrigan,
Aye.
Commissioner Gray,
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor,
Aye.
Commissioner Seavam,
Aye.
Vice Chair Corey.
Right.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, I said aye.
Thank
I'm in
you.
agreement.
Thank you. Chairman Kovacevic?
Aye.
Okay, 6-0.
Okay, item 6, discuss and provide direction, possible modifications to zoning ordinance, Chapter 17, wireless communication towers and antennas.
Okay, Chairman, Commissioners, again, we're picking up from our discussion last month a little bit. Quickly, the direction that we're given from the Town Council is to bring back to Planning and Zoning, review of the existing ordinance, resolutions, and documents related to wireless communication services. We began that discussion at your meeting last month by reviewing a draft ordinance as prepared by Mr. Campanelli and comparing it to the approved ordinance and seeing what things were in that ordinance that the Commission might like to see in a final ordinance as it moves forward. Tonight, we are going to go back to July of last year, the last time the Commission reviewed the previous ordinance before it went on to Town Council, and look at some of those things that the Commission discussed at that time that were not included, or maybe were, but different in a different way, and see what of those things you would like to see brought back into the ordinance. And then from there, we'll begin to actually craft a revised ordinance for future consideration. And then again, once we do that, we'll hold public hearings on that before we send it on to Town Council. So, jumping in then to the approved ordinance and looking at some of the things that were not included. So this is the first one right off the bat in the purpose statement. The Commission had looked at changing some of these first words from encourage to promote, minimize to limit, encourage to require, encourage to require. Didn't do that. Would you like to see those changes made?
Commissioners?
Yeah, Chair, I mean, I'd like to see number 2 be require towers to be in non-residential areas, but I assume that John's going to say that's not a viable pathway.
Anything else?
Any
here?
other commissioners? Commissioner Corey, Commissioner Spiam?
I have no comments.
Okay.
No comment directly to
Sorry.
that, but as you know, that what I always say here is I hope we're not being too restrictive, that we unintentionally limit advancements in the technology. For example, I hear from residents saying, when can I get my 5G internet? If we don't have technology that is relevant and up to date, we're going to limit these kind of things. So I want to make sure that whatever regulations we put in place, which I'm in agreement with most of them, we just don't limit in the types of technologies that we can broadcast here in the community that would help businesses thrive and attract residents to want to move to our town.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. So,
Oh, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Commissioner Corrigan?
Chair, wanted to ask, what would be the problem with, first of all, I heard something I didn't quite understand, and I understand that broadband internet would be more appropriate in Chapter 16. We're talking about Chapter 17, or did I mishear?
I think you misheard.
Okay, back to the point. What would be the problem with saying we require non-resident, exclusion of towers in non-residential areas, just for the sake of discussion? Why would that be unacceptable?
Chair, Commissioner Corrigan, if you look at a map of the town, most of the town is residential. And if you don't allow any towers in a residential district, there'll be much of the town that would not have coverage.
Well, I would like more.
Many people in the audience are saying I'm wrong, and I'd be glad to have them come up and they can correct me when they have the chance.
I hear you.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on.
So next item that was discussed previously had to do with some of the language dealing with stealth or camouflage technology. The language that was in there was amended slightly to state the stealth design, such as monopoles, flagpoles, should be utilized to camouflage the pole. So that was added to the ordinance that you saw. Also, in what was approved, there's a statement that wasn't in the actual section where we deal with stealth that covers part of that same topic, defines camouflage. That definition probably should be moved to definitions. So again, there's language in the code dealing with camouflage and stealth design. And so the question is there really enough there? Are we covering the topic, or is there more that you might want to see covered in terms of types of stealth design? Let's see, did I have, yeah.
All right, commissioners, any comment on stealth design? Not hearing none.
Okay. So in previous discussion, there was quite a bit of discussion about noise. There was discussion about putting a 50 dB max on measuring equipment closures. There's also discussion about requiring underground of the equipment. Those weren't included. There are sections of the code that do talk about noise. I do point out again, as we did before, that our town prosecutor has tried to steer us away from using decibel meter measures because of challenges he has in court doing that type of an approach. But that doesn't keep the commission from wanting to put something in there that way if you desire.
Commissioner Corrigan.
Since I'm going down the road of being provocative and unpopular, I'll go ahead and keep the trend open. I'm concerned that we've only had the Campanelli letter since January, and we're already talking about, from what I saw from the last meeting and voiced my opinions on, we're excluding a lot of things that were included in that Campanelli letter. My concern is, and I'll be even more unpopular, to provoke an old adage about, you know, the client who acts, or rather the client who acts as his own counselor has a fool for a client. And if that made sense, I don't know. In other words, what I'm saying is maybe we should listen to the attorney. The attorney is the expert. He's crafted an ordinance here that is really a preventative measure and a productive measure. Preventative in the sense that we, as a community, our small town, should listen to the attorney we hired, I think, and be careful what we exclude from those ordinance issues, unless it's something that really stands out that simply doesn't apply to our town. So from the observation side, on the protection side, and I'm going to be even more unpopular, there's a lot of big companies out there that have very large war chests. And I won't name names, but you know them all, Verizon. Anyway, that's the biggie. And they've done well with coming into communities and just using their power, their attorneys, their money, to use that as a leverage against, you know, the lack of knowledge, I'll say that. And if we have an attorney who's crafted this, we've paid for it, we've invested in it, he's come back, and it just seems like we're excluding more and more of the issues that he's brought forward. I'm happy to do so if they simply do not apply to our town, and they simply are unimaginably exclusive. So one example was, I think we eliminated the balloon test. We eliminated the decibel reading because we don't have the equipment to do that. And we've made progress because we've talked about vaults for concealing the equipment underground. And I see the path going down the road here where on Chapter 16, we'd end up putting something above ground, and the whole consensus from everything I've heard is everything should be underground. So that's my concern, and I just don't want to eliminate anything that our attorney, our expert on data and cellular, code and ordinances, anything that we exclude from that, I don't know that we are doing that wittingly and knowledgeably. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, before I go on, if I could just comment, Commissioner Corrigan, I appreciate that comment. And my take from the last meeting was there was a lot of the Campanelli ordinance that you did want to see in the future. And so my plan is to, when we come back with a revised ordinance, most of that will be in there. As was directed last time. So going on then about noise, any direction here on the regulations you'd want to see?
Commissioner Gray?
Thank you, Chair. John, can you just clarify, did you say that in the upcoming draft that we've omitted vaults or underground equipment, or is that still being considered?
So it is not in the ordinance as it was approved by Town Council, but if you'd like to see it in the draft that comes back to you, tell me and we'll put it in there.
Personally, I would.
Okay. Not hearing anybody opposing that, I'll move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think,
I was concerned about some things that I thought were eliminated. Maybe they're still there. I had some concern about, well, I guess the noise and the vaults, but I thought from this latest tally, I have a list of items here that we talked about. One was a requested map of where the existing, now I know we're on chapter 17, but one of the things I requested, because I have a complete lack of knowledge on this, the map of where the saguaro SRP cactus type, so I use the word saguaro, it's a decorative indication, but the towers, all of those SRP towers, an engineering drawing, a schematic, a number that are out there, a map of where they are. I did request that, and maybe even engineering drawings is another thought that I had, and the components that are in there. And I thought that might be helpful. It's just a little small slice of the big cake. But now I know this is in regard to chapter 16, but it's something maybe that we should look at because, again, the Campanelli letter is crafted as an ordinance, and I think we're straying a little bit from that. I'm concerned we're eliminating things maybe we shouldn't. That's my opinion. Willing to listen to other thoughts.
okay, let's
Okay?
get through and then we'll
Sure.
comment on what's.
And so another thing the commission brought up was putting something specifically in this ordinance about graffiti. There is a town code already that deals with graffiti, so did not put something specific in here. Again, we can if the commission wants to add that into this specific section. Another piece that's different is that there were a couple of different competing sections dealing with landscaping in the draft that the commission looked at. When we finished with your review and looked back at that, we decided it was less confusing to combine those into one section, eliminating some of the pieces, and so that would be a difference that you would see compared to what you looked at before. This is probably one of the biggest topics, this and the next one from your discussion before, and what we really want to get some input on this evening is setbacks and separations. So currently, the ordinance does require that any tower be set back at least 100% of its height from any property line. So if it falls, it stays on the property that it's on. Then tower setbacks from residential uses was in Table 1. And accessory buildings must be set back consistent with whatever the zoning is in that district for any other building. So the table as it's in the code requires a tower to be at least 200 feet from a single family or duplex, 200 feet from a vacant single family duplex, 100 feet from vacant other residential zone land and so forth. You can read that. So the tower cannot be within those separation districts unless the council determines the goal of the chapter is better served with a reduction. So it takes council action to allow something less than what is shown here.
And that distance, those distances are substantially less than the ordinances we've reviewed, and I think we've talked about expanding those distances
Right.
from single family, correct?
Right, you did. And so what was talked about here mostly was increasing that to 500 feet. But no towers within 300 feet, so you couldn't even get an exception from council to be less than 300 feet. And that all towers would require an SUP. That's what I heard the most being discussed. And so just to give some context to that, just here are a few examples of towers at 300-foot separation and what's around them of different types. So one's a church steeple tower, one's just a regular standard tower. Here's a large lattice tower, as well as some other monopoles. And another one's a couple of cactus. And so towers are in residential areas and currently less than 300 feet from residential uses in town. So again, what I felt like I was hearing mostly before is all towers require an SUP, regardless of location. If between 300 and 500 feet from residential, they need some extra justification for why it needs to be there. And in no case would we ever allow another tower within 300 feet of residential.
Okay.
Is that the direction you'd like to go, or is there something more than that or less than that?
Yeah, I think that's the direction we want, but Commissioner Gray.
Well, I just want to, I have two questions, I guess. I think back to other hotly contested deliberations that we've had. And based on the examples that you've given, if we lay this in here, we've created a scenario that's basically impossible to conform to, right?
Right, all those would be grandfathered in non-conforming uses.
And what's your guidance or opinion on implementing a separation distance that's has zero potential to come to fruition in the town? It seems I'm all for it, but it seems risky that we're going to layer in new language that we know up front no one can conform to.
Chair, Commissioner, I probably should have included that map again. I didn't. We talked about it a year ago. I can bring it back in the future as we continue to discuss this. When you look at 300 feet from any residential in town, what does that leave you and what are the spaces available? It is very limited. Most of it's going to be in washes and golf courses where any future towers can go. There may be a few other spots, but it's pretty limited.
And I mean, this is where talking about 16 and 17 together becomes important in the deliberation, because the more restrictive we are here in 17, the more likely we are to proliferate right-of-way deployments, my way of thinking.
It's possible.
We're not going to recommend or do anything tonight. We're just going to talk about it. So I think
just
that,
giving me some direction to bring back, and you'll continue that discussion as you get into it.
so I think that this is a point, I mean, again, all of my DNA says I want to go with this, but I think it's probably problematic. And I think we ought to consider backing off of that and going to something more reasonable, like 150% of the height of the tower or 200% of the height of the tower, versus layering in something that's overly restrictive.
Commissioner, that has to do with the fall zone
Yeah.
on that, which is different than these numbers.
Well, they work together, don't they?
To some degree, but one is where it's placed on the property to make sure if it falls, it stays on the property. but doesn't really say how far it is from a residential use. So most of the towers are in the 50 to 60, 65-foot range. And so 200% of that, a 65-foot tower is 130 feet. So it's nowhere, again, near these distances.
But if I layered 16 and 17 together, I'd much rather have a few 60, 70-foot towers than I would having one on 10 times that number of street corners to get coverage.
Right.
So I think it's something I think we should keep in the air, and we should talk about some more. And with respect to the fall zones, I like the, I think the one, if you go back to the fall zone slide, I think that the minimum, I think we should have our fall zone be 120% of the height of the tower rather than falling right to a property line.
Okay. So the next related one is a separation distances between towers. And so that's in a table we'll look at in just a moment. And I had to remind myself too, when we say tower, what does that include? Is it just a monopole? And by definition in here, it's basically all kinds of towers, including alternative structures. So here is the ordinance as approved, and then the red strikeouts were what I was hearing suggested as a modification in terms of the separation between towers that we would want to have. And again, here are just some existing examples of towers. I didn't go out to measure them and check to see for sure what they were, since most of them are in that 45 to 65 range. I just assumed that's what they were and use that that distance, with the exception of maybe the saguaros there. I figured were probably a little shorter. And so when you look at these two commercial areas that we have, there's really very little opportunity for any additional towers to go in. There's a little bit in this piece of commercial down here off of Saguaro. That would meet a separation requirement. Didn't mean to do that. Over here in this industrial commercial area, it's already pretty well covered by towers, by meeting the separation requirements. And so there's not much opportunity for new towers in those commercial areas at the current separations. And when you increase those separations, it makes it even more challenging. So again, here's what we have. Here's what was discussed before. And again, not final decisions, but just kind of direction for staff and what we might bring back for further discussion. Do we want to increase those distances as proposed, leave them as they are, something different?
It seems in the other ordinances that the concept of effective prohibition is a very important concept. Yes. That we have to be concerned about. Mm-hmm. We're using these setbacks and separations of towers. Are we prohibiting a carrier from providing service in town?
It does provide some, can pinpoint what numbers you end up with, can be fairly restrictive. Can bring back those maps in the future as we talk about it. Before, when we were talking about the 500-foot separation from residential, we ended up with basically the Plat 208 area was open for towers and a couple other little spots around town. When you combine that in with the separation from other towers, it was very few spots were available.
Who could review the ordinance and make a determination whether or not we're effectively prohibiting? Is that something we can determine in advance?
I think as part of our review, as we get these numbers together and put together some actual maps, I think we can come to some conclusions that we'd want to put on the record that we think it does or doesn't. Certainly we don't want to say on the record that it is an effective prohibition. We will need to look at that.
Okay.
So again, any direction you want to give here? Keep the existing numbers, go to larger numbers, something different?
Commissioner Gray?
I just think, I mean, I'm going to make the same statement just for the record, but I think this is another one where this table needs to be reviewed in concert with Chapter 16. The more restrictive you are here, prohibition, I think, is kind of moot because the accommodation mechanism between our whole system would simply be to default to 16, which our current understanding is by right, without the ability to control, generally speaking. So I think, none of us care for this, but I think we have to be really careful that we don't pivot a carrier into wanting to leverage what's by right under 16.
Certainly, going along with that, Commissioner Gray, is part of what we discussed before, and you may want to come back to again, is kind of that hierarchy of locations and determine where you would most like to see any towers go and make that the easiest thing possible. And then those places where you most don't want to, make that the most difficult place to put them. So you haven't prohibited it, but you've made it difficult. So that, again, tries to steer the users to where you'd like them to be.
Commissioner Corrigan?
Chair, are we aware or do we know whether we have, in fact, Mr. Campanelli on retainer? Are we still allowed to use his services and review all of this in light of an attorney, rather than us kind of second guessing in our little town? None of us in the room here, well, okay, I'll speak for myself. I don't know beans about broadband and cellular, and I cannot quote you the FAA regulations on Chapter 17. No way. I can't even. So my point is, Chair, if we have Mr. Campanelli on retainer, shouldn't we run this all by him? Because he's the attorney. And again, not to reiterate an adage, but we have to be careful. We shouldn't be that client who finds himself a fool for not having an attorney. That's it.
Commissioner Proctor?
I preface my comments, I'm jumping into this river that's been flowing for quite a while, so there's a lot I don't know. But it seems to me we're trying to, this all looks fantastic, but I agree with Mr. Gray that we could be awfully prohibitive. I think our goal is to extend 5G to the town. Now, how do we best accomplish that? I don't know, not to respect Mr. Corrigan, I don't know if an attorney is going to be able to provide that to us. I'm wondering what range these towers have. We do have a challenge with our topography. I'm sure these signals don't bend over hills and valleys, so they're going to have to be strategically placed. I'm just wondering if it would be nice to have a technical expert to come in and say, if you're going to have effective 5G in this town, you're going to need a tower in that valley, on that peak, in this residential area, in this industrial area, maybe in that park. And then we can see if all this is great, see if that overlays in what we are saying here, what the town is doing. But I'm at a loss to know where these towers would have to go to provide effective 5G. And I'm not sure an attorney is going to provide that unless he's got background in engineering and stuff. But it would probably be inappropriate to reach out to a 5G provider, but someone that has that technical knowledge that could advise us what effective coverage would be and where these towers would have to go and what height the towers would have to be to achieve that effective coverage. And then we can bring that back and overlay a map and say, okay, where are our problems? Where do we get pushback from constituents? It's in a residential area. Can't put one in the middle of the Fifth Fairway of Desert Canyon. I'm with you. I don't know what I don't know. I'm just trying to apply a dose of common sense here. But it would be nice to know where towers would have to go, what range they would be to give the town effective 5G coverage. And then we can overlay this to that and see where our problems would be.
Commissioner Corrigan.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is not so much with the technical aspect, the engineering aspect, and so on. My concern is with an expert being that attorney that we did hire and we did pay. Maybe we still retained, I don't know, who knows and has litigated these issues. I don't know that it's so much a technical issue because, again, the technical issue, if you want to go to a technical expert, I guess you'd go to someone who's a broadband provider. I'm not sure that's wise. Yeah. He would, you know, he probably wouldn't, he'd favor whoever he's representing and probably not our little town. But speaking as someone, you know, again, I'll reference Campanelli, speaking as someone who, him, not me, who has litigated these cases, who has designed ordinances to really help us as a town. That's the whole idea, is to protect the community. That's why we're here. So, and I think that maybe is the answer, is that, okay, maybe he's not a technical expert, but he knows enough that he litigates that way, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Guess we'll move on. So another item that you discussed quite a bit last time was co-location. How many additional users should be designed on a tower and ensuring there's power for the users. So we did make some modifications to the ordinances that went to council to address that topic, and the piece underlined there is what was added. So hopefully that addressed what the commission's concerns were at the time. If not, you can let me know if there's some additional modification you might feel needs to go with that co-location language.
Okay. Commissioner Corey, Commissioner Sveum, speak up if you have any comments on these as we go through.
So a quick reminder that the way the code is currently set up, there are two types of applications: administrative and public review. Administrative is a longer section because a lot of it has to do with amendments to existing towers and the ways those can be handled administratively. And basically the public review, as you looked at it before, was anything that's not administrative goes through public review. Anything that requires a special use permit is going through public review. As I continued to work on that and went back and was reviewing what was stated in section 1703B1 and 2 about the separations and the setbacks, they were those numbers unless the council determines the code's better met by something less. But there wasn't any mechanism to necessarily get those cases in front of the town council. So added a provision in here in the public review that if you're going to request those lesser numbers, what we were talking about a minute ago is you're going to go from 500 down to the 300. Okay, well that means you're a public review application. So that was a little change from what you saw before. There was questions about electromagnetic interference and what that means, and can we better define what limits or allowances go with that. That's not something we delved into in the current code. If that's still a concern or interest to the commission, we can look at trying to add that language or figure out what those statements might be. So that's something you'd want us to look into.
Yeah, I do
think we
want you
should?
to look into it.
Okay. And so similarly, we discussed some other options to drive chest before. The ordinance we looked at from Campanelli last month had a few more tests to go along with that. Drop call records being the primary thing that was in that ordinance. Are there other options for determining the gap of service. You may hear some others from the public, but that was another area that we may want to expand upon. Any thoughts or comments on the gaps? Okay. Requiring some kind of, so there were kind of a list of other items that didn't necessarily make it into active discussion. I think this mostly came from then Commissioner Kovacevic. And so just kind of run through these quickly. So it should require some kind of security for maintenance of tower equipment and landscaping. We have this one provision in the code currently for security for removal of a tower. Would you like to see something more detailed to cover maintenance of tower equipment and landscaping?
Yeah, I think they should post a bond, and the bond should be updated every 3 years.
Okay. RF testing, annual RF testing. Current code requires testing within 40 days of completion of a tower, and then random testing. There's not a specific requirement for annual testing in the current code. Should we up that for specific annual testing?
Again,
Commissioner Corrigan?
sorry, Chair. Again, I think there's been public comments in regard to the radiation, and I also think that we need to examine that a bit more. So yeah, I'm in favor of that. But now, going back to the gap, as I recall, the gap requirement or the verification of the gap, that's usually something that is a drive. What do they call it? Drive-by or driver? Yeah.
Drive test is one option.
And that's done usually by the provider, right? So, and I guess maybe the critical issue there, from what comments I've heard in the past, is that that favors the provider, and so maybe they'll, test at a certain time of day when, it favors their, interests. And another option was provided to cover that idea of, provable gaps in service. And I think we maybe need to re-examine that. So.
It's on there, the drop call
Okay,
records. That's
good.
what,
All right.
that's, yeah,
Thank you,
I
Chair.
think we should stick with the Campanelli ordinance on that.
Okay. Let's see here. So building codes, compliance with building codes and structural requirements. We do have 2 standards currently in the code about meeting the building codes and town engineer review. Again, was that sufficient? Or is the Commission looking for something more than what these sections provide?
I think it's fine.
Okay. Power and fiber optics underground. So I guess there continues to be some concern that there'll be overhead service somehow going to the towers. And there needs to be something more specific in the code to require underground. We believe the code adequately covers that currently, but again, if the Commission feels differently, we can add some language to reinforce that point.
Go ahead, Commissioner Corrigan.
Sure. Yeah, underground is the way we've done it historically with everything, all the utilities. So I think we have to keep that as, this whole committee was planned on that basis, and I think we need to keep that, everything underground. Chair?
Okay. And then providing backup power. The federal government does require some level of backup power. I'm not sure how extensive it is. We could research that a little bit further to see if it's 100% of the time or something less. But if that's a topic you want to have us look into further, we could.
If there's governmental requirements, federal government requirements on that, then
Okay.
they should be fine. What do you, Peter?
But we can require things like hush kits and, well, we can bump that up. Beyond just emergency power, we can say, sure, you can provide emergency power, but you've got to have a hush kit on the generator, and you can put a technical spec behind that.
Okay.
I would agree with that. We're especially since we're having so much trouble with the noise ordinance.
Okay, some other random things, require parking adjacent to a tower. Typically, that's going to happen through site plan. We can make something more specific, require an indemnification agreement with the town. Similar to a previous one, cannot interfere with government emergency communications. More clarity on what that means. Requirement for insurance. Want to have these things dark sky compliant. That's a requirement anyway, but we could add something specific to that statement. And then require new development to designate tower locations. So in particular, this could be used if the state trust land is developed, because it's really our only large developable area left, and to have them put a statement in here that says that if somebody's developing new land like that, that they have to pre-designate tower location so we know where they're going to be from the start.
And yeah, those are all important, and we have, for example, we have other ordinances with insurance limits. We have other language with indemnification and the parking agreements from the other ordinances, so,
Right.
but all those are important.
Right. This last one on new development, I haven't explored it yet, but that really feels to me like it really goes someplace else in the town code, the zoning ordinance or someplace, so that somebody's looking to develop knows that's what they have to do, because if they're just coming out and developing land, they're not going to be looking in the wireless ordinance to find out they're supposed to designate a place. But we'll think about that. And I think that's the end of what I have to say tonight. I'm going to sit down.
Do we have any speaker cards on this topic?
Yes, Chair. The first speaker is Larry Myers, and the second speaker is Lori Troller.
This is why everything takes so long. So let's just review. Can I have 15 more minutes? Let's just review how this all started 3 years ago. There were a group of citizens concerned about property values and medical issues, period. I'd like everybody to look at their phone just so we understand we get 5G. There's nobody hurting for 5G in this town, so just so we know that. Your phone will tell you that you get it. Clear that point up. We hired an attorney. He created an ordinance that our town attorney, who no longer exists, fought for a period of time, refused to turn the document over. One of the commissioners here sitting on the dais, who's not here tonight, but who sits on the dais, actually has his position because she chose to resign because we weren't given that document. Then a group of citizens flipped the council so that we could get a vote to force the attorney who wrote the ordinance. The ordinance is fine. What Mr. Campanelli wrote requires only the personalization of the town of Fountain Hills. It's been reviewed, it's been litigated, it's been to hell and back. So we're now asking John, who knows nothing about any of this. There are people sitting in this room who can run circles around John, and I'm not one of them, but I know more than John. And I'm the least of the people that are in this room that know more. So we finally get the Campanelli document, and now John's picking it apart. And then you're going to spend an hour and a half reviewing the pick apart when we already have the ordinance. We can personalize it for Fountain Hills, and we don't have to worry about selectively prohibiting, because we can do what he wrote. We paid him to write it, and we still have some time left for him to say whatever we personalized is fine, because that was the deal we made. Now, one council member was charged with putting this all together with the citizens that know more than John and you all, so that we can get to the end of this sometime before I'm dead, which is where we are. It's been going on for 3 years, and I heard the same crap when we talked about detox. Selective prohibiting, and oh my God, we can't do this. We can do plenty. And it's already written, and it's actually been improved on. And so I suggest we get on with it. And this stuff, forget it. Just leave it alone. Look at the Campanelli document and the personalization of it, and you'll be just fine. And we'll get a new town attorney that might not block our efforts to protect the citizens' property and health in this town, because that's what this is about. And it does involve 16 and 17, which is what Chairman Gray, when he was chairman, said in the first place. And then our council decided that wasn't the way it was going to go. Thank you.
Good evening, Commission. Lori Troller, resident. There's so much to be said, and try and get this said quickly. Very first question, and it seems to be everybody's concern, are we prohibiting? No, you're not. Again, he just asked, can everybody make a phone call? If you can call 911 on your cell phone, you met the requirement. That town met their requirement. We are not prohibiting anything. That's what prohibit means. If you can't make a 911 call. And that call only has to be so long. It's not the 2-hour phone conversation I have with my mom. Hi, Mom. It's a 911 call. That's the only requirement for this. So if you're wondering if we're prohibiting, no, we're not. So if there's anywhere in town we can't do that. And then you start talking about gaps. Those gaps can be so long. You can have a 1/4 mile hole. That's not a definition of a gap. So all these words that are in this ordinance, they're very important what they are. So is there a gap? I mean, my phone is dead right here, but if I move it, no, it's a 1/4 mile. So all this stuff, there's answers for all of this out there. It's actually very easy. I've been at this for a long time. I can help you with any questions. Commissioner Corey was talking about limiting 5G. I want to let you know, this ordinance, no way in any stretch says we're only going to ever have 5G. So I've already got this positioned. Your next issue, we're not going to have towers in 2 years. It's all going straight up to Elon, right? What our issue then is your neighbor's antenna, which way it's aimed at. If it's aimed at my house, I'm getting concentrated exposure. Those things have to be aimed up. That's going to be your next ordinance. There's nothing in this ordinance that's going to stop you from saying that. There's nothing in this ordinance that limits the technology. Absolutely nothing. So now I'm going to get back to the approach that we're taking. And Larry pretty much said everything. But we did spend $8,500 and we hired Campanelli. He's highly recommended. He's recognized. He's a case lawyer and he's been in the courtroom and he knows exactly how telecoms think and work and take advantage of the self-directed municipal codes. So Attorney Campanelli he has written hundreds of ordinances across the country, and we have one he wrote specifically for us. We can tweak it, and that's about all we need to do. There's some things we need to add, but when he wrote it, his has respect for the federal, state, and Ninth Circuit. We are not considering Ninth Circuit in this work right here. That's very important because our state laws are so awful. Arizona has the most constricting. So anything in the Ninth Circuit can override any of our state laws. So that's what Campanelli wrote. Can I? Okay. So in the last meeting.
Give her another 2 minutes.
Okay. In the last meeting, collectively in this room, we spent more than 16 hours going nowhere, picking apart Campanelli's ordinance. So you're taking this professional, John read paragraph for paragraph. Do you feel we should keep that? When you have no idea the court cases that bring about that verbiage. So now we've castrated that ordinance that he wrote, that the professional we paid for wrote. He castrated 70% of it. Who knows better than the case lawyer that's been in these cases and has written these things? All I'm saying is, stop what you're doing. Start with Campanelli's document. Weave in some other strong ordinances. I've been saying Ithaca and Copac all along. Weave those in, because there are some elements missing from Campanelli's. Campanelli didn't have insurance. There's some other really big hitters in there that you want to get in, and you're done. And you've got something he wrote, and we still have time in the bank with him. When you get that, when you're happy with that, take it back to him. He'll look at it. He knows Ithaca. I know he knows Ithaca. I'm fairly sure he wrote it. So Ithaca, the only reason with Ithaca you got to watch, it's the Second Court of Appeals, which is not ours. So, but I think that most of everything that I would think would come in, you're not going to have an issue there. So all I'm saying is, let's come back to Campanelli's documents, what you guys fought for the first half of last year. Let's bring that back in. Let's start with that. Let's throw our flavors in, you know, the few things that we want to be insistent on. Campanelli doesn't know the whole desert thing, so he's talking about wood structures. We don't have wood structures here, you know. There's a few little things like that, but please start with Campanelli, and then we will be on the right road, and we will get there very quickly. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, any comments? Commissioner Corey, Commissioner Sveum?
No comments.
Yes, just one comment. So I think that still part of these wireless, I've said this many times, but still part of the wireless capabilities is the fixed wireless access like we've talked about in the past. And I know, you know, just for me personally, I can't get T-Mobile to provide my home internet because the megabytes per second down is too slow, and up it's too slow. It doesn't compare with Cox. And I've reached out to T-Mobile, and they said that we need more service where I live to be able to provide the speeds that I would need to get their 5G home internet. I'd like to. I'm a T-Mobile customer, and it would be at a discounted rate for me. And I know other people are in the same position. So I just wanted to call that out because that, I believe, is still a wireless signal that would be broadcast from these cell towers. So when we talk about balancing, and I totally understand, balancing, protecting the community with providing services, I don't want us to forget that that is one of the services that people are going to expect. Thank you.
Commissioner Corrigan?
Chair, I would like to hear more from, in means of a document, if it's available, from Ms. Strahler, those other findings that she has in regard to, in addition to the Campanelli letter, so that we can see what other cases apparently have been fought and maybe garnered around or protected around these new ordinances, which you mentioned, Ithaca, New York. So if she's willing, I think we maybe should address that and bring that into the conversation. If she has documents like that, we maybe want to take a second look. In my understanding, my extremely limited knowledge of this in general, I do know there's a difference between broadband and cellular communication. So I don't think the two are, that's why we have Chapter 16, Chapter 17. I don't think one can be compared with the other. We're trying to protect everything in our town. So they're two different two different factors, and we need to address that. But we can't do that with our own knowledge. None of us in the room has that knowledge, except for maybe Ms. Trawler and others. But my point is, I think maybe if she's willing, we should take those documents and take a second look, review those. That's it.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, this is Phil again.
okay. Commissioner Sviam?
I think it's worthwhile, as long as there's some potential large company that could possibly come into town, that why not find out what the needs are of some companies that would come into the innovation area that may not be provided at this point in time. Since, and I think again, this is not in my wheelhouse whatsoever, but I think it's worthwhile checking on a future large customer and find out what their needs might be. And thank you, Lori, for coming in again. You certainly provide great information when you come. I think probably 3 or 4 times you've been in since I got on Planning Commission, and I appreciate your explanation of things, and hope that you stay connected with all of this and keep educating us from what your knowledge is, because it certainly is helpful to us that don't know the ins and outs of this topic.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm hearing over again is, I mean, we're starting with our ordinance and incorporating Campanelli's work into our ordinance, and it you know, is rather than do that, how do we start with Campanelli's ordinance? Is that, how do we do that? That just seems to be where I'm hearing that concern.
Chair, Commissioners, if that's the direction you want to give me to move this forward, that's what we'll do.
Commissioner Gray?
Well, let's just, I mean, let's back up a step and go back to what's the value in taking this approach? I think you're going to say the value is to have a form and function conforming ordinance using the components from Campanelli that, you know, allows us to have a uniform look and feel to our ordinance binder is probably the primary reason we're going this way. Is that fact or fiction?
That's one of them, although what Mr. Campanelli did can be converted in terms of a numbering scheme to fit our format without too much challenge, I think. My bigger challenge with it is some of the procedural things and the conflicts that it created with the rest of the ordinance. But again, those are all things that can be reworked. It just seemed to be easier to start with what we already have in terms of how we process cases, rather than going back into how he did it and trying to figure out how to restructure all that to make it work.
Yeah.
But
So
it can be either way.
I mean, I go back to the whole reason that we belabored and ultimately shut down the conversation lying, you know, in wait of this Campanelli ordinance is that we couldn't get it. And we didn't know what was behind the curtain. No one would tell us what was behind the curtain. We still don't know why we weren't allowed to see behind the curtain, but we weren't. And so we get it. The ordinance is fill in these blanks, and magically it's going to go through some algorithm and spit out a perfect document. I don't see a problem. I guess I don't share the same sentiment that we need to go to Campanelli's draft language and then stuff it into our ordinance binder. I'm perfectly fine going this route, but I think if we go this route, I think we need to be okay with saying, okay, you know, whatever, if there's a retainer and there's money left on the retainer, bring the guy back in at the end. Maybe we do it before it goes to council, bring him back in and say, hey, give us a QC of this because this conforms with what, you know, the rest of our chapters align with. I don't have a problem with that. I also think that we have to, I think that we have to remember, you know, what are we doing? We got sent down a path, however long ago, I don't think it was 3 years, but however long ago, we went down a path of blindfold, you know, blinders, not blindfold, blinders for Chapter 17, right? That was the direction from the council. We weren't allowed to look left or right of that. We couldn't open up 16. It was just 17. Our objective the whole time has been really what's in 16. What's in 16 is allowed by right via the federal government, passed down to the state, passed down to us, that says a provider can go put a small cell tower anywhere in the right-of-way, anywhere in this town, and none of us can say anything about it. That's the simplified version, right? That's our real objective, is how do we minimize the damage and the impacts from whatever angle you want to take, whether it's property value or any other. You know, how do we minimize the impact of that? And I think we're at a point where we've got to say, procedure aside for a second, we've got to say 16 and 17 have to come together, or we have to talk about both at the same time instead of talking about 17 in isolation from it, because we're making decisions, not decisions, we're making recommendations and suggestions on 17 that I don't know that we'd make if we thought about the implications of you know, of what the right-of-way application would necessarily be. And one more thing, and I'll shut up. I don't think any one of us wants to put a restriction on cellular communication service in this town. We constantly gravitate back to that position. That's not what we're trying to say. What we do want to heavily deliberate, though, is as we get into those higher, denser frequencies, you know, in the quote-unquote broadband area, you know, how do we address that? And that's still to be determined, I think, as we work through this whole thing. So.
Any other comments, commissioners? Commissioner Corrigan?
I agree with Commissioner Gray, but would add that we're not maybe using all the resources pro bono, I might add, that have been provided by Ms. Trawler. Apparently, we haven't seen of course, we're very, you know, aware of the Campanelli document, but what I'm hearing is that litigation that has continued on from the point from last January, and not only in the 9th District, apparently, from what I'm looking at, or my notes, but also in the 2nd. And I guess that what that means is that what she referred to as the Ithaca, I think that's New York, should be considered. So we haven't really looked at any of that. So if there's that information that she is providing pro bono, now we paid for the Campanelli letter. If she's got more, I'm sure she's put a lot of time into this. I think we ought to look at that and look at what's come down litigation-wise and decision-wise, and they must have then crafted other ordinances to accommodate those new concerns or litigation or complaint or whatever the term is, and crafted some sort of an ordinance, I guess, for this town or another town or something. And we should work with that because now somebody's done that pro bono, number one. We can graft in pro bono stuff from attorneys who have written ordinances, and now we have access to that. So we're getting a double freebie here, and so we're going to turn our heads and just say, no, we're good with this Campanelli letter, and let's just move on down the road. I agree with Commissioner Gray, but I think we should compound that by, you know, looking at all the provided information. from those cases in one or two towns back east, and also those ordinances and what she has been willing to do and provide up to this point, and modified and so on, I guess, given the current information. And I think if we need to look at that, that's my thought.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. We're not taking action. Did we give you a?
So I guess I'm looking, I know it's hard to see the two head nods that aren't in the room, but do we have, so my hope for your May meeting was to bring back the start of a draft ordinance that's bringing the pieces together. And so am I starting with 17 and modifying it, or am I starting with Campanelli and modifying that? That's the direction I need in order to bring you something next month.
I think you're, I think we decided that it's not really, that we can do it from our ordinance.
Okay. Okay. And again, that just because I start that next month, if you look at it and you don't like it and want to send me back the other direction, that'll be fine, just as long as I know what to do for next month.
Yeah. Commissioner Gray, did you have something?
Yeah,
Something
just
else?
don't lose sight of the value of folding 16 in before we, bake 17's language.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm still, I'm at a crossroads still personally where I think I understand the structure of, 16 being public right-of-way, 17 being private, on parcel, if you will. But I don't know that I'm fully convicted that they shouldn't be, meshed together in this case. And I don't appreciate the full, level of disruption that might cause to our ordinance structure, framework, if you will. But I think we need to still be prepared to potentially meld the two together.
And again, Chair, Commissioner Gray, that's certainly the intent. After we take a first blush look at here's what it's looked like coming together, bringing these pieces, then we'll transition and start talking about 16 before we take any further action on 17, and see what's there, and then start talking about how we move forward from that. That's sort of the intent.
Director, are we okay pushing signs to next month?
Yes?
Okay, well, let's do that.
We need a specific motion
Okay.
to do so, but yes.
I'm looking for a motion to
Oh,
take up signs in
Actually-
May, at the May meeting.
not sure, this isn't a public hearing, so I guess we don't necessarily need an actual motion, right? Because it's not a public hearing at this point. So a motion would be nice, but not necessarily required now. They're thinking
So
about it,
moved.
Second.
Commissioner Gray made the motion, Commissioner Corrigan second.
Chair. I'm sorry, before you do that, we did have a speaker card that's been sitting here through this,
Oh,
and so maybe, it's up to you, maybe you want to give the speaker a chance to say something since he's been sitting here.
sure.
We have one speaker card, and it's Jean Schlechter pertaining to Agenda Item 7.
Okay, my name is Gene Selecta. I'm a 30-year resident of this town. Also spent 5 years in the Planning and Zoning Department as a planner. I also spent 3 years on this commission. And finally, I was on a sign committee member back in 2012. I was at about 8 to 10 members. I was the only non-business person. Just a reminder about the signs, and if you look at the purpose of the ordinance, it talks about that there needs to be considerations regarding public safety, property values, obstructions, and aesthetics. 24,000 residents I think would be horrified at some of the changes being requested, and are certainly not happy about the expansion of the political signs that was passed recently. Unfortunately, the interests of few businesses are being addressed here and not the total community. Back when I was involved with the signage issues almost 15 years ago, there was a great deal more communications, including the sign committee and an open house. That's sadly lacking here. Residents really need to be heard. I'm definitely against increasing the number of A-frame signs from 1 to 4. It's ridiculous. 1 is adequate, and more would be devastating to the beauty and aesthetics and the safety of our town. Plus, every temporary sign creates a hazard from weather, from abuse such as blocking sidewalks, placement on the streets, and I remember that. However, allowing 2 signs where there are multiple entries is certainly reasonable. I'm also against increasing the display time beyond the sunrise to sunset requirements of the current ordinance. These temporary signs now become permanent with no control or monitoring after hours. They become subjects of vandalism and worse, potential hazards, safety. Also, think about a business open 40 hours per week and probably less during the summer, but their signs are sitting out there 168 hours a week. Our dark skies make these A-frames at night even a bigger risk. By the way, 13 years ago, when businesses routinely left their signs out, but became required to bring signs in at night, we found that many of the businesses stopped putting out the signs, period. That signaled to me and others that those signs may not be as valuable as they talk about. As for size, the average sign size is 6 square feet, 2 by 3. I see no reason to change that. However, for businesses with 2 entries, I would think 2 signs of up to 6 square feet each is very reasonable. On yard signs, I'm against the idea of increasing those to 4, because during elections, I believe you can put virtually any number of signs in the town right-of-way adjacent to your property. So no need to complicate any more of the ordinance. And I'm against railing signs, period. Businesses have windows, doors, A-frames. Stop the clutter. Thank you.
All right, so we had a motion and a second to move the agenda item 7 to May.
Before we vote, I just want to say I won't be here if we go to the next agenda item, but I agree with everything he just said.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. We have a roll call vote. Paula?
Commissioner Corrigan?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sevim?
Aye.
Vice Chair Corey?
Aye.
Chairman Kovacevic?
Aye.
6-0.
Okay, agenda item 8, commission discussion, request for research to staff. Hearing none. Agenda item 9, commission request from Director Wesley.
So I'm going to move on past that, I think, just a little bit. Usually kind of combine these last 2 together anyway. So what we see we have coming up then for your May meeting will be signs. And we'll talk about those first, give Farhad his chance to do that. And then we'll pick up our discussion on the wireless ordinance. And hopefully I can have a first draft of some pulling the pieces together for you to look at and respond to at that meeting. For June, at this point, then we have the continuation of the downtown overlay ordinance. We had thought if you talked about signs tonight that we might have a draft ordinance at your June meeting. At this point, don't know if that will happen or not. We've had the special use permit requests out there for Wilson and Mr. Ejim at Penn Hills Boulevard and El Pueblo that you saw a couple of months ago. He has not come back with those, so we don't know if or when those might come back. We've also had the request for the cell tower SUP over off of Ironwood and Fountain Hills Boulevard that you acted on. It's on hold at council, so don't know that that would come back here for any reason, but it could. I'm saying some of those things because we're starting to look forward to the summer and when we might have summer meetings and when we have some time off. Right now, we're thinking we may be able to take the month of July off, but we can narrow that down as we continue on. But it does look like we have things for your May and June meetings and no public request items at this point that would interfere with that. We have one or two others that may be coming in, but if they come in between now and the next deadline, which is May 19th, you wouldn't hear them till August anyway. So again, it looks like there's a possibility, if the commission desires, we could take July off. But again, we'll formalize that as we move forward.
As far in advance of the June meeting that we can get a telecom doc to look at, that would be great, because that'll take some time.
Okay.
Thanks.
For the, I'm shooting for your May meeting for our first draft of that. So,
Okay.
yeah. So you'd like it tomorrow if I could give it to you, is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Got it.
Okay. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks, guys.